We don't serve people like you here." Those were the cold, stinging words that echoed through the fancy restaurant, silencing the chatter of nearby diners. The words weren't directed at a rowdy customer, or someone causing a scene. They were aimed at an elderly black woman, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes gentle but filled with quiet dignity. Her name was Mrs. Johnson, and she had walked in that evening simply hoping to enjoy dinner with her son. But instead of being welcomed, she was humiliated by the waiter who looked at her with disdain. It was a busy Saturday night in one of the city's most expensive restaurants. Couples laughed over candlelit dinners, businessmen clinked glasses of wine, and the aroma of roasted steak filled the air. Mrs. Johnson, dressed modestly in a navy blue dress, slowly made her way to the reception desk. Her son, David, a tall, well-dressed man in his late 30s, held her arm gently to steady her. "Good evening, table for two, please," David said politely. The hostess smiled warmly, ready to guide them to a table. But before she could, a young waiter, no older than 25, rushed over. His name tag read Kyle. "Excuse me," Kyle said sharply, blocking their way. "This section is reserved for our regulars. I don't think this is the right place for you." David frowned. "What do you mean? We have a reservation." Kyle glanced at Mrs. Johnson, then back at David. "Look, sir, maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere. Less formal. We don't usually seat people like her here." The room fell quiet. Diners turned their heads, sensing the tension. Mrs. Johnson lowered her eyes, clutching her purse tighter. David's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "People like her? My mother has done nothing wrong. We came here to enjoy a meal, just like everyone else." But Kyle wasn't backing down. "Sir, I'm just trying to save you embarrassment. Management wouldn't want this. Please, take her somewhere else." Gasps rippled across nearby tables. Some guests whispered uncomfortably, while others looked away, pretending not to notice. Mrs. Johnson finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "It's all right, David. We don't have to stay. I don't want to cause trouble." But David shook his head. "No, Mom. You deserve better." At this point, the restaurant manager, alerted by the commotion, hurried over. "Is there a problem here?" Before David could answer, Kyle jumped in. "I was just explaining that this section isn't suitable for—" The manager raised his hand. "Kyle, that's enough." He turned to David and Mrs. Johnson, his face apologetic. "Sir, madam, I am so sorry. Please, let me personally seat you." But David's eyes stayed locked on the waiter. He wasn't ready to let this slide. Once they were seated, Kyle continued glaring at them from across the room, clearly unhappy that they had stayed. That's when David pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, the entire atmosphere of the restaurant shifted. A group of suited security men walked in, followed by a few individuals who looked like senior officials. The diners turned their heads, confused by the sudden presence of VIPs. And then it happened. David stood up and said clearly, so the entire restaurant could hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, I think you should know who this woman is. This is Dr. Evelyn Johnson, my mother. She is a retired professor, a civil rights activist, and the very woman who fought to make sure this city's restaurants could never deny service to anyone because of their race." Gasps filled the air. Some diners clapped instinctively. Others looked stunned, whispering to each other in disbelief. David wasn't done. He continued, his voice strong and unwavering. "My mother spent decades of her life fighting for equality, so that people like that waiter wouldn't dare treat others as less than human. Without her work, this very restaurant might not even exist the way it does today." Kyle's face turned pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The room was too silent, too heavy with shame. He looked down, fidgeting with his apron, as if wanting to disappear. The manager turned furious. "Kyle, step into my office. Now." But Mrs. Johnson raised her hand gently. "Wait." Everyone turned to her. Her voice was calm, but powerful. "Son," she said, looking at David, "anger can't cure ignorance. Only understanding can. She looked at Kyle directly. "Young man, I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, it was cruel and hurtful, but because hate will only weigh you down. Learn from this. Treat every customer with dignity, no matter who they are." The room erupted in applause. But David had one more surprise. He stood up again and announced, "And for anyone wondering, I'm not just her son. I also happen to be one of the major investors in this restaurant chain." Gasps echoed again. Kyle nearly collapsed where he stood. David looked straight at him. "So when you chose to treat my mother like she wasn't worthy of being here, you weren't just insulting her, you were insulting the very foundation of this business." The manager nodded, embarrassed but grateful. "Mr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson, please allow us to make this right. Tonight, your dinner is on the house, and from this day forward, every staff member will undergo diversity and respect training." As David and his mother finally enjoyed their meal, the atmosphere in the restaurant had changed. Guests kept coming up to thank Mrs. Johnson, shaking her hand, telling her how much they admired her strength and legacy. Kyle, meanwhile, sat in the back office, his head in his hands, realizing the gravity of his mistake. Before leaving, Mrs. Johnson said one last thing to him. "Never judge someone by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear. You never know who they are, what battles they've fought, or how much they've already given to the world." That night, the restaurant didn't just serve food, it served a life lesson that would echo far beyond its walls. Every single diner who had witnessed the confrontation walked away with something to think about. The message was clear: respect is not optional, it is a fundamental right every human being deserves. People who had quietly watched the humiliation unfold found themselves questioning their own silence. Some admitted later that they felt ashamed for not speaking up, realizing that silence in the face of injustice is just another form of approval. Others, deeply moved by Mrs. Johnson's grace and forgiveness, promised themselves that they would never again turn away when they saw someone being treated unfairly. The young waiter, Kyle, sat in the back room long after closing, haunted by the image of Mrs. Johnson's calm eyes and her powerful words of forgiveness. For the first time, he realized how deeply his actions could wound another person. It wasn't just about serving food, it was about dignity, humanity, and respect. He knew he had been wrong, but he also knew he had been given something rare, a second chance to change. For David, the moment was personal. Seeing his mother treated that way reopened old wounds, but it also gave him the opportunity to show the world just how extraordinary she truly was. He wasn't just standing up for her, he was standing up for every person who had ever been dismissed, ignored, or judged unfairly. His reveal as one of the restaurant's major investors added weight to the lesson. You never know who you're dealing with, and the person you look down on may turn out to be the very reason you're standing tall. And for Mrs. Johnson, it was another reminder of why she had fought so hard all her life. Even in her old age, she found herself still teaching, still inspiring, and still reminding people of one simple truth. Kindness costs nothing, but its impact is priceless. So the story of that night became more than a dinner gone wrong. It became a story about humility, forgiveness, and the power of respect. And long after the lights of the restaurant dimmed, its lesson continued to shine. Treat every soul with dignity, because every soul carries a story you don't yet know.